responses to public input today?
Well, we're going to talk about climate action later today. But just say there's a lot of opportunities to save money with some of the suggestions that have come up with climate action plan. You know, in terms of being energy efficient and you know, in terms of transportation, different ways. So there's places, I think, you know, when you have multiple benefits from something, that you can really focus on those and end up saving money. So I think that's one of the things I'm looking for out of that. You know, we've actually put, most of that has been volunteer time. We've got a huge number of volunteers doing that work. So like we're really spending much on that.
I disagree with the two speakers today on okay, if we don't know if there's climate change, that there might be climate change, it's saying that once again, we're not sure, so let's ignore it. I think it's worth looking into. We don't know what caused massive amounts of CO2 in the past. There were huge forest fires that raised it. It was, you know, volcanoes. We don't know. We don't know the answer to these questions, and we never will know the answer to those particular questions. But I, for one, think it's worth a look.
Well, we know it. What killed off the dinosaurs? They were smoking, apparently.
Camels, I understand. It's the only one that was around at that time. I couldn't quite understand, Joe, whether you were advocating people carry weapons into the national park or
I think it's I think they allowed it. I think the parks allowed it and at one point and there it may have been reversed or whatever, but I think it's important too. You can.
I think you can.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if that makes me comfortable or not. I don't know if I'd rather bump into a black bear that I've seen many times in the Olympic National Park and never been threatened by, and I've had the goats right in my campsite before, and frankly, I'm not too sure I wouldn't be more nervous about a guy walking along packing a 357. So
You should be thinking more about the cougars. They're the ones that are hunting and not the goats.
yeah. Anyway.
Another issue.
Phil,
Yeah.
any?
No, I think the commissioners have responded.
Okay. We have a number of items on our consent agenda.
Commissioners, as you're taking up the consent, I would note that based on comment from a number of weeks ago, that on the, I'm sure that,
Risk management.
yeah, I'm looking for it here, is that.
Number one.
Yes, that we did revise the HIPAA release to more restricted scope.
Right.
In response, and appreciate the question that was raised and try to accommodate that. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting, I was thinking about that too, at the fair. The county extension had Eve Dixon was at their booth with some very helpful booklets people could carry away that described in pretty good detail the different invasive weeds that we have, including the wild chervil and of course knotweed, and everyone's favorite, the Scotch broom.
I'll go ahead and move the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded that we adopt the consent agenda. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. We can move into the commissioner's briefing session. As was planned, I met with Sue Tredevick and Kathy Baker Friday. We met at the old Red Cross building in Port Angeles and spent the time looking at the practical application and details of how we could enact a community forest within Jefferson County using DNR properties. We didn't look at is it going to happen or is it not going to happen, but how would we do it? And look particularly at the properties that Commissioner Goldmark was interested in, 5, 6, 7, and 8, which are basically around Port Ludlow. Some of the questions that we had were funding, of course, measuring the difference between development value of the properties versus the timber and timberland value. As you may recall, there was a change in the original legislation that went from the county or those interested in changing the designation from having to come up with 50% of the development value to 50% of the difference between development value and then timber and timberland value. And I raised the issue, well, if there's virtually very little difference, then 50% of very little would be a pretty small sum. So we need to look closely at what is meant by that in actuality. And then other practical questions, who or how would policing of the area be accomplished? Would it be done by environmental health, sheriff, DNR? How and when would the 25% cost of managing harvests, timber harvests, how would that be dealt with? So we have a lot more questions than answers, but I was really pleased at the cooperative nature of the meeting. It was, how can we work on this together? So it was time well spent. It tied in pretty well in my calendar because the day before I'd spent pretty much the whole day at studying forest management up in North Bend. I don't know if you guys have been there. There's a great education center that's on the property of the Rattlesnake Lake watershed. I think you went near there, didn't you? Didn't you go stay someplace near North Bend, or was that up by?
No, I was on Highway 2, up
Okay.
to the North Cascades.
Yeah, this was off of 90. Anyway, there's forest management is a science and an art, and I learned a lot about how some of the county-owned forests are managed over in Vashon Island to produce revenue for their park district, and to do the kind of thinning that is good for the environment, good for habitat. So you'll be hearing more of that later.
Thank you. My question is, where's Rattlesnake Lake doing on this side? Don't understand that.
Actually, I don't think there are rattlesnakes there.
No.
I don't know where they got the name.
There are none.
It's a lake that appeared by a mistake. They blocked off, I forget the name of the river that's uphill from it, created a lake, and then that lake created pressure that caused water to flow underground and then fill up this lake. And there used to be a town there. And basically there was nothing they could do about it except maybe tear out this dam, and he didn't want to do that, so now it's a very nice lake.
Where exactly is it?
It's about 15 miles south of North Bend.
Interesting. Well, I spent Saturday at the county fair parking cars. It's a pretty tedious job. It, 3 hours takes about 6 hours to pass.
Thank you.
But it had to be done, and it was because the Friends of Parks and Rec got this, had made this arrangement, and they got $750, I believe it was, for setting us up and parking the cars. So I volunteered for that, and I was at the Democratic booth for a while. And I did my part to support Timicum by eating their wonderful pie and ice cream.
Someone had to do it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, support the band. Yeah.
Support the band.
Yeah, you did.
I had a workshop with the PDA about the Public Development Authority for Fort Worden. It was originally, put together in September 2009, an ordinance by the City Council, because it's this considered one of the three main economic drivers for the city. And it was originally aiming to connect with Central primarily, until the legislature decided they were going to not budget anything out of the general fund for state parks, and so they zeroed in, the PDA zeroed in basically to become, rather than what it originally was for affordable housing and the post office and a few other things, to zero in on Fort Worden and create possibly 2 PDAs. But, so it's a lot of discussion about the schools, and I brought up the fact one more time that part of the reason they got their funding, the $2 million from state parks and the $2.4 million from community colleges was because we of the county worked it very hard when we were down in Olympia. So a lot of discussion about the leases and what works best for the leases. And the School for Historic Preservation is trying to put together a lease. It looks like they're looking at 2 20-year leases, a 20-year with a 20-year extension. And but for the colleges, the belief is that they need a 50-year lease with state parks to be able to attract colleges that are willing to invest the money that is required to be invested. So that's what they're looking at. There are 50-year leases. My inclination, I think, would be, since I'm more conservative, on the saying the 25-year lease with a 25-year extension. But they don't believe that that's strong enough. So anyway, that's.
Any movement on how to deal with the Discover Pass? In
No, there's no discussion on the Discover Pass at this meeting. It's gonna be a really tricky one to figure out. They have a year to do it. But, yeah, Fort Worth is more like a bunch of businesses, not like a state park, so. And then if they give us a break, they gave us a break for a year, but if they continue that break, then I would see other state parks saying, well, we sell hot dogs. It get really very confusing.